Welcome to Strip Cover Lit, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Adrian Ford, and we're here for the 41st entry in the Writer's Quote series. Got a crazy man's beard right now, huh? It's fine. It doesn't matter. Maybe I'm a crazy man. Anyhow, today's Writer's Quote will return us to The Daily Stoic by Ryan Holiday and Stephen Hanselman. Today's quote comes to us from January 17th under the subheading Reboot the Real Work. The quote comes from Epictetus in Discourses, and then there is a blurb from the authors as well. The quote here is, "I am your teacher, and you are learning in my school. My aim is to bring you to completion, unhindered, free from compulsive behavior, unrestrained, without shame, free, flourishing, and happy, looking to God in things great and small. Your aim is to learn and diligently practice all these things. Why then don't you complete the work? If you have the right aim, and I have both the right aim and right preparation, what is missing? The work is quite feasible and is the only thing in our power. Let go of the past. We must only begin. Believe me, and you will see." Epictetus, Discourses 2.19.29 to 34. And the blurb from the authors reads as such. "Do you remember in school or early in your life being afraid to try something because you feared you might fail at it? Most teenagers choose to fool around rather than exert themselves. Half-hearted, lazy, effort gives them a ready-made excuse. It doesn't matter, I wasn't even trying. As we get older, failure is not so inconsequential anymore. What's at stake is not some arbitrary grade or intramural sports trophy, but the quality of your life and your ability to deal with the world around you. Don't let that intimidate you, though. You have the best teachers in the world, the wisest philosophers who have ever lived, and not only are you capable, the professor is asking for something very simple. Just begin the work. The rest follows." So the reason I want to bring this to the Writer's Quote series is that there are times in my writer's life where what I have to do in order to keep moving forward is to give myself assignments. Sometimes I am feeling spry enough that those assignments can be, I have to write a poem every day. Sometimes those assignments can be 250 words of productivity and 500 words total. What does that mean? A lot of times, what I noticed myself doing in grad school, I'll just take it back to times where I failed as opposed to trying to moralize on it. When I was in grad school, I was living a pretty monk-like existence, basically working out and writing and getting drunk and writing and editing, submitting things. It was all about literature, and I would get some exercise out of my body once in a while. To do that, I was forcing myself to write an X number of words per day, normally 500. 500 for me seems to be about the right count to where if I'm on something, 500 words keeps me focused. But I couldn't always be on. It seemed, there were times where I wasn't working on anything in particular. And what happened on those days was I would sit and I would strain to get my 500 words. And it became a practice of me basically just journaling, just writing the brain fog, putting the brain fog onto paper. And that was helpful at once. And what I mean by at once is that One time, I sat down after completing a notebook, opened the notebook, and said, you know what? I'm going to sit back today. Because there's always snippets of short stories I haven't finished, poems that I've started but haven't finished, ideas that I've written down. I was like, I'm going to take stock here. I'm going to look through this notebook and take stock of what I have. Probably 60% of it was just me journaling. Probably 60% of it. 60% of the pages in there, absolutely worthless. Worse yet, I found that what I was doing is I was working myself to death. And that's, I know, not literally to death. That is hyperbolic, that is melodramatic. But I was pushing myself pretty hard because I was also doing all this reading, all this note-taking, things like that, in addition to my actual classes. Most of the journaling started with me saying how tired I was, me saying how I didn't feel like I was getting anything done. What great examples of absolutely worthless behavior. Complaining into a notebook. Taking time and complaining into a notebook when, if nothing else, I could have been reading something. A lot of the reading that I did in grad school was heavier, right? Stuff that you should have read, that sort of stuff. Historical stuff, that sort of stuff. Biographies, that sort of stuff. Nothing fun. Nothing, it'd be good for me to read. I kind of like this sort of stuff. I read some of that, but mostly it was stuff that I felt, I'm in grad school, I need to read this. I could have been doing that. Instead, I was complaining onto the pages of a notebook, complaining in ways that would never lead to anything. But I was getting the words out. The words meant nothing. I mean, imagine all that time that I spent in that one notebook on all of that complaining. If I had just spent those moments doing something more productive, I could have been pouring gasoline on the productivity. If I was sleeping during that time, I would have gotten more out of my grad school experience than having just complained onto the pages of a notebook. Now, it is not true. It is not true that I was unable to be productive. It's not true. Of course I could have been productive. I grabbed myself by the boots, pulled myself up, and just been productive. Creative work or not, work is work, right? Even if I had, so one thing that I've learned to do later, I will have a main project, and when I am so it's been hard for me really running the YouTube channels and working full time, trying to get in some type of shape so that if a COVID thing comes around again, I don't die from it. And writing. It's been hard for me to get into this place, but when I have a main project and a word count that I'm forcing myself to do, I'll split them. I'll say, okay, well, I'm working on this short story that I've got this great idea for, I think. I want to get 500 words a day. 200 of them have to be on that short story. The other 300, I'm just going to throw into something absolutely meaningless, but it's words on the page, but it's a story, or it's a poem, or whatever. Because Hemingway said, I don't remember if he put a number on it or if it was absolute. Hemingway said, I think it was all. Hemingway said all first drafts are shit. And that's true. So if you write a first draft that's shit as your side project, you can still go back and edit it. You can still go back and make something of that thing. You can still go back and often, what I've found oftentimes is that when I'm taking one project more seriously than another, the project that I'm taking more seriously than the other is much harder to edit, because I wasn't just having fun with the writing. I wasn't seeing where the story went. I had something in mind that I was trying to do, you know. And there is an old story about Robert Frost, probably apocryphal, but he met two young poets, and one of them told him, he asked them, what are you trying to do with your poetry? And one said, I want to say important things. And the other said, I like having fun with words. And he said, okay, well, the guy who likes having fun with words, I can teach him, you know. And part of that, in redrafting stories, looking back at them years later, it's harder to tell which ones I had that divine writer's inspiration to write, and which ones I was just putting the words on the page, kind of having fun with it. But that is today's writer's quote of the day from January 17th in the Daily Stoic. This was the 41st video in the writer's quote series. I hope to have you back not only for the next writer's quote, but for the next poetry discussion, short story discussion, opening paragraph, or novel read-along that I have here on the channel. Hope to see you then.